So there's rules that I want you to think about whenever you're going to work with personality. Okay. These are things that you should always be saying to yourself right before you realize, okay, I'm about to start this work with the personality disordered individual. The first one is clarity. It's important to be clear in your dialogue with the individual, whatever rules apply for the organization, whatever guidelines you're going to offer, you have to be clear because mistakes are okay. I mean, mistakes happen when we're working with individuals. Confusion is not. Confusion is the thing that's going to pull you down as the clinician and gives the client with personality disorder heads up. Simplicity. Interventions need to be kept simple and very bottom line because drama comes up when things get confusing and when they're more complicated. So we want to be very simple. That means that we're going to target things one thing at a time, okay? Whatever it is, and we'll talk about that in a second, what specifically you would target based on each personality disorder. But all of the interventions need to be targeted. So you're not going to be working with an individual on 25 different things, okay? You are going to work on one specific thing at a time. And once that's managed, then you're going to work on another one. But we have to, as the therapist, be able to maintain focus because if there's one thing that personality disordered individuals do besides confuse, is come in with a different agenda than what you initially agreed on, okay? And that could be just that something happened 5 minutes before they came into your office. It just depends. So what we're going to target then are going to be excesses in their behavior, thoughts, and deficiencies, what they don't have. But we need to be honest with ourselves when we're working with individuals with personality disorders about whether we can do this, okay? Whether you can be clear, whether you can be simple with it and target these things. Yes, Jan, they can fog you. That's a great word for it. Absolutely. So assessing your skills, can include many different things. First off, can you be active and responsive as opposed to reactive and passive? Because you're going to have to be responsive when you don't want to be. You also have to be willing to use an altered approach. Remember, it's not like working with symptoms. You're going to be working with personality. So the approach has to be different than what you're normally used to. And you must be able to maintain an active empathetic neutrality. So don't confuse this with not having emotions or not responding. But what you're going to do is refuse to take the position in the drama because that's going to bring things to a more personal level if you're willing to go to the drama. Okay, so we're emotional. We are going to respond, but we're not taking the role of victim, rescuer, or persecutor, even though we might want to. Because it might be, like Jan said, they might try to fog you, you might get upset, you just got into the drama. We need to be competent. Competence means we know something about personality disorders. This is why you're taking this webinar. And flexible in your treatment approach. If you're devoted to a specific model, forget about it. That only works in research. It doesn't work in the real world. You have to mix and match with personality disorder, mix and match techniques. The lower the treatability, the more likely this is the case, because you have to be able to pull out all different tools right on the fly in order for you to be able to do what you need to do with these individuals. We need to accept and tolerate that transference and countertransference is going to happen. You cannot avoid it, okay? What you have to do is make sure that you don't react to whatever is going on with regard to the transference and countertransference. You need to have an awareness of your own personal reactions and what the meaning of those reactions are, okay? And you can't react in your own reaction. And of course, this would mean have consultation available Can you elaborate what you mean by being active and responsive? Yes. So as opposed to reactive. So if you're active, then you're listening to what the individual is saying and you're going to respond to what they're saying. That you're not emotional about it. If you're reactive, emotion is involved. You're defensive. You're not thinking about what it is that you need to say. Or in some cases, being passive is I'm not going to say anything when I should say something. So for example, if I have a personality disordered individual in my office and they say something to me that's inappropriate, being passive is not going to be helpful or effective for them. What would be helpful would be responsive in let's say saying, I'm sorry, can you please elaborate what you meant by that? Can you please explain to me why you said that to me? I'm curious as to why that was your statement that you made to me. So we're not going to avoid things and we're not going to be reactive, because reactive is about being impulsive and not thinking about what it is that you want to say. We need to think about it. So that means that you're having, and we'll talk about this in a minute, having two dialogues going on at the same time, the dialogue that you're having with the client and the dialogue that's going on in your head. I hope that answered the question. So back to the consultation. So consultation, have it available. That can be a team, that can be a supervisor, a colleague, anybody that you can go process this stuff with. And you will have to do that, because otherwise you're going to get in your head about it and then be like, oh my God, what does that mean? And don't think for a second that hasn't happened to me. That happens to us. You know, it's just the nature of working in this with this particular group of people. But if you have somebody you can go talk it through with, then you can become a little bit more realistic about it and recognize what has happened. And by the way, if the countertransference gets out of control, then you need to refer this client out to somebody else. Be comfortable using silence and going slowly. We don't have to hurry up and do anything with clients. If that means you're just going to sit there and contemplate what you're going to say next, that's perfectly fine. Okay. Have a willingness to accept success or failure, because that will absolutely happen. Use the paradox of power by willing to succeed or fail. In other words, you're going to have to fail in order to succeed. And a few other things: admit your mistakes, be comfortable saying no, and then being comfortable breaking conversational rules, which I'll elaborate a little bit more in a second. So clinicians need to be honest with yourself about how you feel about working with personality disordered people. So some people, well, I use the analogy of addiction. So I love working with people with addiction issues. I find it extremely gratifying, and the individuals that I've met probably have taught me far more than anything I learned in grad school. And the same thing with personality disordered individuals. I wouldn't still be doing this after 25 years if I didn't love it. But if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to. There's no requirement that we love it. But you need to be honest about it with yourself. If you can't stand it, then you're not going to be able to do the work that you need to do with this. And, that's okay. But we just need to be honest. So we need to be able to tolerate intensity, be able to practice anxiety management. You have to have a better observing ego than your patient does. Okay, so you have to have self-reflection. You have to be able to correct yourself if you say the wrong thing, or adjust and adapt to something that your client wouldn't be able to do, because that's what it is. You're going back and forth, having to adjust when you're in sessions with individuals with personality disorders. We have to be able to, jump around in that and adjust ourselves appropriately. And we have to have the ability to change our behavior if we need to. Okay. If that means, like, for example, I had a client, a personality disorder client, borderline, that I was working with. This is several, it might have been right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I was still seeing patients face to face. So, and I do now, but it was right before we shut it all down. And the individual came in and she had a Coke can and she had alcohol in the Coke can, which she admitted to me. So I asked her to leave because that's not appropriate for the session. And I'd meet up with her, I'll text her later or whatever and set up a new appointment. So she left, slammed the door. I could, hear her stomping down the hall. And I sat and waited for my next client. So my next client came in, sat down, and we started talking. And probably like 5 minutes into the session, that other client who had left my office walked into my office in the middle of a session with this new client and didn't even notice I had a client in there. And so I have to change my behavior in those circumstances, right? I have to get up very calmly and ask the client who barged in to leave. And so I did. And I said, Sally, whatever her name might have been, I'm going to need you to leave and I will communicate with you later. So I did, and I escorted her out, and she left, and I terminated that relationship, by the way, after that. But we have to be able to change behavior as needed in order to adjust for whatever the circumstances might bring, because sometimes it's very unpredictable. And these are a few avoiding burnout tips. I'm not going to go through them. Those are for you, and we've gone over several of them. But it's very important that we take care of ourselves when and have appropriate boundaries when we're working with personality disordered individuals, because it will be challenging.